Thank you for coming along to my session today. Um, Today I'm going to base my talk on some experience converting our cadaver wet labs into a mix of low-tech and high-tech teaching strategies as part of my role in um, lecturing into speech pathology, but I'll tell you a bit more about myself and about that in a second. But before I do, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that we're meeting on today. I am coming to you from Darkendrung. I'm still working on my pronunciation of that. I'm only newly here about 5 weeks now, and previously from a Wabikal land. And I just want to acknowledge and appreciate all of the beautiful lands that we might be meeting on, and feel free to pop yours in the chat if you are on a different land to me today. So as a bit of a whirlwind introduction to me, there's various snapshots on the screen here of my areas of research and expertise. So my background is coming from a PhD in mental health and resilience in children and adolescents. After that, I did a few postdocs that were around evaluating complex interventions. So usually in priority populations, so things like improving care for alcohol consumption in pregnancy, embedding care for physical health for people with mental health problems, and working out what are the barriers and facilitators to improving evidence-based practice and reducing prevalence of some key health concerns. And upon landing at UTS, I have started growing my research interest in some lived experience aspects of mental health. So on the screen in the middle picture here is my two tiny humans, Freya and Logan, who are newly 3 and 5. And I had quite severe postnatal anxiety and depression when I had both of them. And that, coupled with my PhD on mental health and resilience in children and young people, I am very passionate about bringing lived experience to practice and to research, and around particularly improving our care for youth mental health. So right now I am working on a small project funded by the Disability Research Network at UTS, which is around integrating GenAI into our human-led care for youth mental health. And I recently have started leading a project in our allied health research node in the Graduate School of Health, and that is an extension of that work. It's looking at how might we integrate GenAI into client-facing care in a trustworthy and responsible way that still upholds all of our professional standards and duties. So if you'd like to connect, please reach out to my email or on LinkedIn. So with all that being said, here at UTS, I lecture into the discipline of speech pathology, so in our Masters of Speech Pathology. And as part of that role, I have been looking into how do we teach our students around neuroanatomy and head and neck anatomy, and how do we do it in a way that helps enhance their career readiness, and particularly through AI integration. So we know that AI is not going away. It's here and it's exponentially increasing, and we find ourselves in quite an unprecedented situation in higher education, in what do we do with this and how do we make our candidates career ready for also using it in their workforce. So we know that enhancing career readiness includes equipping students to critically evaluate and ethically apply AI tools to help them find ways that this might help enhance their skills around their therapy planning or their client communication, and preparing graduates to move into careers that are now very much tech integrated. So I won't stay on these slides too long because I suspect a few people here are already aware of things that we have going on at UTS. So we do have things like resources that are helping understand what is Gen AI and what do we need to know about it, and particularly know before using it in any of our research and teaching. So we have other things now that are emerging, like our guidance on how we reference use of our Gen AI. And there's also some little screenshots on the screen here that are around what I now have embedded in all of my assignment pages on Canvas, which are around letting my students know that they still need to do the assignment work themselves, and whether or not AI use is or isn't allowed in each of their assessments. So, as I said, a brand new world to be navigating in teaching. Now, in addition to that, I've got some examples here of extensions of not only AI in teaching and learning, but also our research, and particularly from examples from our speech pathology team. And so recently we have been working hard to do some discipline-wide mapping of our inclusion of AI in our teaching and clinic materials. So identifying how are we using it in our teaching, at what moment, how could we do it better? And then those previous slides, things around giving our students those clear signposts about when they can or cannot use AI. And then also we do various other things. So we have done some professional development around AI and disability. So thinking about innovative ways that we might improve our assisted communication tools, for example. And then if we do that with AI, what implications does that bring out? For example, if we were to use AI to speed up some of our augmented communication, how do we maintain authorship by the person? How do we know that anything that an assisted communication device is saying or helping someone say is still quite true and honest to the person that's using that device? We've also done a roundtable on ethics and Gen AI advances, and we've also done a government consultation around safe and responsible AI use in healthcare. Now, we also have bits and pieces going on that are looking into how we might, other ways we might innovatively use things like virtual reality to manage some of our neurodevelopmental conditions. And this is my colleague, Kath Gregory, who's working with Dr. Lucy Bryant, Bronwyn Hemsley, and a few other of my colleagues. They have seen incredible changes in people's communication disability from short use of virtual reality. So it's very, very cool, innovative and upcoming research. They're also been working with some stroke survivors around how might Gen AI be used to help them communicate, whether it's taking some short words and helping develop that into a broader message, or other very cool ways of helping people to essentially write their life stories and put legacies together for their families. So all really meaningful and cool work to be a part of. And beyond speech pathology, we do have some interdisciplinary things that we've been doing. So around our UTS Gen AI Enhance. So that's led by Professor Bronwyn Hemsley and a team of colleagues. And we're doing some work as part of that right now with the Apple Vision Pro, where we are testing learning about anatomy with our master's students, and how we might be able to utilize that in a heavier way in coming years. And just to wrap up this bit, I kind of mentioned this at the start. This is the short project that I'm doing, and two of the projects that I'm leading at the moment around integrating GenAI into healthcare. But that is a long, short intro about various things that are going on at UTS that I'm myself and other colleagues are involved in. But I guess what's brought me here today is what I would call a tale of anatomy labs to immersive classrooms. So before I go any further, I'd like to invite you to share in a brief story with me, which is around the subject that I teach in our autumn semester in our Masters of Speech Pathology, called our Fundamentals in Speech Pathology. So once upon a time, in the heart of a university, tucked behind the hum of city streets, two cadaver wet labs stood quietly, filled with the echoes of generations of anatomy students. And these labs had long been the cornerstone of learning, hands-on, tactile, and deeply immersive. But the world was changing, and so were classrooms. So enter a team of passionate educators in the Masters of Speech Pathology, nestled in the Graduate School of Health at UTS, who saw an opportunity to reimagine how students could explore the human body. With curiosity and courage, they began a transformation that was not just technological, it was pedagogical. Students who once entered the lab now stepped into mixed reality classrooms. This wasn't just about replacing wet labs. It was about reimagining engagement and clinical learning. Students explored neuroanatomy through immersive simulations and then reinforced their understanding with hands-on models, creative activities, and peer discussion. The classroom became a space where technology amplified tactile learning and GenAI supported content creation helped educators tailor materials to a new moment in time. And there's a little note down the bottom there of many thanks to Microsoft Copilot for helping me craft that, co-authored that. And I've done a micro-credential in ethical AI. So it's in the spirit of acknowledging that that was co-created with AI. What I would like to do now is show you what all that tale meant in a practical sense, starting with embedding some low tech into what was previously our cadaver labs, and then showing you what we did with some high tech. So I won't spend too long on the low tech because I usually get the feel that people are here to hear more about the what I call high tech. But essentially in our low tech, so let me take a step back. So for fundamentals, we would normally have cadaver labs. This was the first year that we didn't have them. So I took the space in our teaching schedule that would normally be cadaver labs, and I redesigned them to be sessions that were of what you would call mixed reality. So as part of that, students had these on hand. So these are our usual or traditional anatomy models, affectionately named by my 5-year-old as Flower and Love Heart. So during our classes, if I got questions from students, I could say, okay, well, let's take a look at Flower or let's get Love Heart out. And we would often have them on the tables, and my students learned that they were the names of our traditional models. We also had a range of head and neck anatomy modules because we do a lot of learning for hopefully obvious reasons around, tongue, jaw, larynx, all of our airways and food ways. And when these were out on the table, we had the traditional manuals there as well. So all the numbers on these models represent, each structure of the brain or the skull or the muscles or whatever it is. And students, if they were interested, could say, oh, I'm not sure what this structure number 45 is. Let me, look that up on the manual. And so this is me just showing you a little bit of the model. Inside, Flower and Love Heart have a brain, and we pull that apart and we spend about 6 weeks on the internal structures and functions of the brain as well. Now, in addition to our brain models, we have these ones on the tables as well, which are the head and neck anatomy modules. And what we ended up doing, so we usually have our classes in Building 20 in what we call our Level 10 pod room. So there's 8 sets of desks around the room, and at each desk there is a little screen, so that anything that I'm showing up on the big, presentation, the big projector, can be seen by each table of students. And they had the models with them whilst we were doing some other reality, which was around augmented reality and some other creative activities. So here they're working through our standard activity sheets with their models, and then they've got the iPads out to start and embed some augmented reality as well. We also did origami. So we got them to build the skull and to build the brain. And I think this one was well received by students because whilst they were creatively making these, I was also presenting to them on our traditional didactic slides about things, and they were able to connect where each structure was in a 3D way that obviously is very different to a cadaver, but was still, I think, quite engaging and lighthearted and fun for many of the students. Now, we transformed our pod room for this particular week, and we made it into this big long eye shape of tables up the middle of the room, which essentially forced all of our students to be one big group and speak to each other and work through these various creative activities. And the action potential game was another one. And the students had to essentially build this board game, talk about all the parts of a message that heads across a nerve. And yeah, it was also another really fun moment where they were kind of cheering each other on and interacting with people that maybe they didn't usually interact with quite as common, because they're usually divided out into their regular tables they like to sit at. So and then the last low-tech thing that I embedded was a body mapping activity. So this one came about through some feedback from students that they were finding it difficult to remember all of the anatomy orientation terms. So things like anterior, posterior, proximal, distal. And in my other hat, at UTS, I'm a research manager on our Nurture Next Gen project in genetic counselling, and body mapping is a creative research method that we are using in that project. Essentially, you lay the person's body down on the paper and trace the entire body shape. And in our research project, we usually get people to fill out their body thinking about a related moment in time or experience that they've had. But in this case, we got the students to decorate that body map with all of the terms and to do it in a collaborative way with each other. And actually, I think that was a really good way of going about this. This is just one email that I received shortly after these classes. It just said, "Thank you for today's activity. We loved bringing out our inner child." So that's the low-tech portion. And what we did was we then also embedded what I would call high-tech. So you might have heard me a few slides back mention that on the table there was iPads, and we were also using augmented reality. So this is actually a photo of Skelly. Skelly was the nickname that the students gave this skeleton that we were able to basically, you somewhat projected into the room. So you are holding the iPad and you find space in the room where you want the skeleton to look like it's appearing. And so you can explore it in a 3D way. You walk around it with the iPad in the room, and it even allows you, as you can see here, to pretend that you're sitting next to Skelly. And this is my colleague Lucy Bryant and two of our fabulous master's students this year having a photo with Skelly. So you can see what this looks like a bit more here. So there's not really a skeleton in the room, but when the students set this approach up and they have their devices with them, they are holding it up as if there is a skeleton in front of them. So for example, the student here that is looking down inside the throat, she's investigating the vocal cords, the larynx, the esophagus by she would have firstly set up a skeleton and then she's walked up and she's leant over. And she's, by doing that action with the iPad, it's changed the orientation of her view and she's essentially exploring inside those structures. Other students, like the skull that you see on this left side, were walking around that structure. They were kind of holding the iPads under things like the skull to see like the foramen, the little holes in our skull where our cranial nerves come out. So it was just a very it was high tech, but also it was quite an attainable level of tech for people. The students very quickly understood how to utilize this, and they were exploring Skelly at their own pace and whatever structures they felt that they would like to explore further using that technique. And we had, I think, about 20 iPads spread across the room, and we have roughly 65 students as our intake. And when we were doing the augmented reality, we still had our traditional things embedded. So we still had our pages on Canvas. We had a guided note-taking activity. And a lot of these were adapted from the original work of my colleague, Associate Professor Amy Freeman Sanderson, who graciously handed over this subject to my teaching this year while she's on a fellowship, a research fellowship. And the final thing that we had on the screen at these moments was the didactic presentation slides that I would speak to at the time as well. So basically, we were always embedding our more traditional low-tech things with the high-tech things in the room. Now, this brings me to virtual reality. There are different devices, and I'm sure that's not news to anybody. But on the screen here, you can see Apple Vision Pro. This is our newest purchase within the team, which we attained through the award of a Teaching and Learning Scholarship this year. With other colleagues, Professor Bronwyn Hemsley, Dr. Lucy Bryant, Associate Professor Katerina, I never do her last name justice, and Marora. And we have been exploring through a small research project how we might use this device in our classrooms for neuroanatomy teaching. As one learning to share, or maybe two learnings, the first is the aftermath or the side effects. So this is just a photo of my face after I've been wearing it for about half an hour. So you usually end up with your goggle imprint, and they're still quite heavy. Each device ranges in weight. So that was the Apple Vision Pro I had on. We also have some MetaQuest 2s and 3s. They do vary in weight, but all of them still have this effect on my face. And they're still all very heavy. And I usually max out at the 30-minute mark and want to take it off and have a breath from it. We also, when using this in our classrooms, had a virtual reality safety guideline in place. So this was a self-check sheet. students didn't have to submit this to us, but they needed to let us know that they had definitely read it and they were aware of what discomforts or adverse effects might happen. And also this lets them know types of students who unfortunately are advised not to use this technology. I say unfortunately because obviously that presents a bit of a equity or accessibility issue with using these high-tech approaches. So examples were students who were pregnant, and that was due to increased fall risk whilst wearing the devices. And another example is students under the influence of alcohol or hungover, but one would argue they shouldn't be in class if that is the case. So we did have a couple of students who, after about 15 minutes, took the device off and sat down, and they described that kind of seasickness moment, like, oh, I just started to feel a bit blur when I was wearing that. I had to take it off. So that's definitely a learning from this, and that learning of usually using the devices in short snippets of time. The other learning that I have put this video together about is, so each of the devices require different either hand gestures or remote controls. So this is me with the Apple Vision Pro on in building 20. It took me a long time, longer than I'd like to admit, to realize that to change the screen, I had to do a pinch action on this device. Another learning is what you see here is free access to an app. There aren't a lot of anatomy apps available that show you beyond kind of abdominal or heart anatomy, that go into things like your skull or your full body, that are also seemingly accurate in their information of the human body, and that don't cost a lot of money to use. So what happens is, as with a lot of apps that are out there, there's a free version and there will be limited things that you can access. So right now I'm in a free version of an app. I can get into the skull and some of the vasculature, but if I was to go any further and look for muscles, for example, I couldn't get those on the free version. Right now I'm attempting to demonstrate that at times it's difficult to understand where your hand needs to be to select things. And that did require a bit of practice on my behalf. In all of these apps, you can usually explode features of things, so pulling apart the different bones of the skull, and you can usually bring them all back together with the click of a button or pinch of a button. And they usually all have at least labels to tell you the names of the structures, but sometimes you need to upgrade to a paid version to get longer descriptions of those structures or how they relate. So how muscles, which cranial nerves go through which foramen, for example, in the skull. So I think that's the Apple Vision Pro. But then here are some pictures of our students. So some more learnings. We gave the students the MetaQuest 2s and 3s, which are not hand operated. They require the controls in your hands. For some people, that was great. They loved it. They learnt that there's essentially a little white line that's like a laser pointer to know what to click on. But for other students, they felt like they were kind of very much missing like a tactile, or sometimes you hear the word haptics. So that physical touch of things wasn't there because their hands were always using controls. What did work well was each student wore the device for about 10 to 15 minutes, and their team would sit at the table, and their team is actually looking at, on the iPad, they are seeing what their peer is seeing inside the device. So we projected what they're seeing inside the device onto these iPad screens, and they had guided worksheets with them. So they a lot of the time paired up. One person had the worksheet and would say, okay, the next structure we need to find is this. Can you find it, and can you explode the view on it? Can you locate and click on the info panel for this structure? And that seemed to work well. It gave them a purposed step through of the activity, because this new tech it was quite exciting to many students, and it brings with it, I guess, that risk that you can just get lost exploring whatever you want to for as long as you want to. So it was great to have the pairs and the guided worksheets with them. What I should have said was, the Human Anatomy VR is the name of the app that we were in for these ones. And this is me inside the app. We basically bought an institutional license for this one, but it's called institutional, but it only maps onto one device at a time. It does open up way more levels of the app. So what I'm doing here is essentially taking layers off the skull. So I've started all the way out with our protective skin layers and gone inside as far as I could. Another learning, if you are the teacher with this on and you've decided to project onto a big presentation screen, you can see that me moving my head around at this speed is actually a bit disorientating. It's hard to keep up with me. And when I was doing this, I actually wasn't using big head movements. I was just in the device myself, and I was just kind of doing this to find what I needed to find. So I guess the learning is, if you decide to use this in a setting where you are demonstrating the tech to the students, you need to be aware of just kind of using your eyes a lot of the time to keep your view steady for them. And the institutional license for this we purchased through our teaching and learning scholarship, because from memory, it's upwards of $800 a year to access the full capabilities of the app. So right now I'm going through what is called different layered views. So it starts at lobes and goes all the way down to things like your sulci and gyri, your hills and valleys of the brain. This one also has cadaver views embedded in the app. So let me just check yes, here we go. So you could, whilst you don't have a cadaver in the room, in this particular app, when you pay for this level of access, you can get cadaver images and diagrams that label all the structures and that tell you these more detailed explanations of them. And it's this level of the app that we are now investigating in our teaching and learning scholarship. So just to, one more learning just there that that video was to show was, you can get very overcrowded if you open way too many portions of these applications. You can see here I'm trying to reorganize everything that I'm viewing at once, which is, I guess, very different to if you just had a single cadaver in front of you and you were moving around it. They're very, very different ways of learning. And so lastly, I would say that this was not everybody's cup of tea. Some students who had previously done cadaver labs were a bit upset that they didn't get to do them again. Other students breathed a big sigh of relief that they didn't have to do a cadaver lab, and they loved this approach. So I think, though, that's probably with any new approach that we try in teaching and learning, we do our best to cater for as many people as possible, but it won't always be everyone's cup of tea. And there is improvements that we are still learning about. This last bit of feedback was the subject was really interesting, and it was genuinely amazing to take on a daunting topic, neuro, with somebody who clearly really cared. I really felt that you were doing everything you could to look after our cohort, and that was inspiring to see. That was nice feedback after creatively flipping those cadaver labs. And as I said, please reach out if you'd like to connect, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Julia. That was very interesting and really inspiring. We've got no questions in the chat, so I think if anyone does have a question, I think Nicola, you just put up your hand, did you?
Jordan.
And I did speed through a few of those things, so feel free to, if there's anything that I kind of moved through too quickly, feel free to ask me to come back to that. Or Nicola's saying she was just applauding.
Oh, right.
Hello. Thanks,
Hi,
Julia.
Georgina.
That was very cool. I never wanted to look at the structures of the brain before, but maybe I do now. Maybe. To be honest, probably not. I wanted to know, is this software, and maybe you addressed that because I was listening, but life. Is this software something that you can use in other subjects or share? Like, I mean, I think in one sense $800 is a lot per year, but actually, it doesn't actually sound that much for a whole degree program, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, so once this is because it's still quite new for us, we just got the license for this in the last couple of months, actually. My understanding is, so you log it into one of the headsets at a time.
Yeah.
But in saying that, the headset can be shared amongst the discipline, and also the intent of it was to, from our teaching and learning scholarship, understand how we can interdisciplinary share it and support it. So we have had some chats in physiotherapy around how they might utilize that device and that full institutional license, because on the free version of the app, they couldn't get into the muscles, which they were, for probably obvious reasons, noting would be very beneficial in physiotherapy.
Yeah.
Whereas when we first started out on this, it was mostly just we were inside that subject of fundamentals in speech pathology, and we were focusing in on like the brain anatomy, head and neck anatomy. But yeah, I think there's potential to almost within disciplines or within faculties set up devices with that institutional license, and almost like do a share out or booking system of, on this day physio's using it in their labs, on this day somebody else is using it. So yeah, that would divide, as you say, or disperse that cost out. And we're hoping that what we're doing right now with these devices, we're testing them with students, and we're trying to also then come up with kind of a framework that can be extended to other disciplines.
Yeah, because I can see nursing using it. I can see, first year human anatomy and physiology, which is a subject that I support, being this sort of tech is incredibly helpful. And if it's something that you can't access for free, having something that you can go in and look. And I mean, I certainly think that if I was studying that, I'd prefer not to look at cadavers too. Like, I think you're actually looking at a bit of accessibility and support of, not, I mean, obviously if you need to look at cadavers, if you're studying pathology, well, that's a different thing, but, it's not everyone's, anyway, I just yeah, I would
And
appreciate it if I was a student. Yeah, it's
yeah, and you
cool. Yeah,
actually did remind me then in talking about accessibility of the devices. So there is different attachments that you can add to them that give like more space for eyewear, for example,
yeah,
or we bought a couple of different sized straps because
yeah,
everybody has different size heads. So
yeah, yeah,
I needed the small one, but then we've got quite tall,
yeah,
broad students that needed a
yeah,
bigger strap.
yeah,
And so, yeah, and you can tighten the strap and you can also adjust like the eye distance.
yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so there were a few accessibility things, and a lot of them, I guess, were like device add-ons. But once you're aware that they're available, they're a lower cost than the device, and you
Yeah,
can, grab spare sets of those for students. And the other thought was just we were utilizing like antibacterial wipes between each use for students. So yeah, I think that was their preference themselves as well. But as a teaching staff, we were doing that. But that was an easy thing for the students to take on themselves before they shared onto their next peer. They could do that to the device. Yeah, and there was always the option of declining the use. Some students were very excited to have that in their lab, and then other students were more happy to just watch what was happening, and that was a learning of helping both preferences be included in the class.
yeah. I can see students wanting, and you never know the disabilities or access issues people have. Yeah, it's really cool. It's really
Yeah.
cool.
Thank you. And feel free to, yeah, if you have more thoughts on how you might use it in your teaching, you're more than welcome to reach out, because that's one of our goals in what we're doing right now, is trying to expand beyond our speech pathology team. How else can we share this learning?
Yeah,
And one other thought was around kind of sustainability of our approaches, in that we're very aware what it takes to get cadavers these days, and how incredibly integral they are to many other professions as well. Like if you're going through something like surgery or a medical
yeah,
degree.
you've got to use it. Yeah,
Yeah, so it's kind of like helping all of our students in all of our health related or not health related, any disciplines, still have access to this anatomy learning in a sustainable way. And I guess with anything, the devices right now have been variably affordable, but with any kind of movement in tech, that changes. And so right now, I think the Apple Vision Pro, for example, was more expensive than the Meta Quest. But there's various options and various advancements happening for all of them, which is helpful.
yeah. Part of me wants to say have an open lab where people can come in and use it. The problem with that is I just know some students are going to break it or wreck it. But being able to have any student learning some sort of anatomy to be able to come in and access that sort of space and practice would be really cool. The thing is, it's got to be. I think you've just got to have someone in there. Like, you can't leave students with that sort of level equipment. Much as I would love to say you could, but
And that does make me think. So in the photo, the augmented reality photo where you saw my colleague, Dr. Lucy Bryant, so we needed in that lab to have two of us, and it was often to kind of help the students learn the new tech enough to continue on with their activity, whilst our other teaching staff would be working with somebody who's doing the augmented reality portion. Or so we had set it up in replicating, I guess, what you might do in a wet lab and move around stations. But our stations were like virtual reality, augmented reality, the head models. So, yeah, we needed two staff members, I think. But if you were going to, I think, use it at an increased frequency, then that would that demand on teaching staff would reduce, because the students would pick up use of the tech a bit quicker, I think. And then, yeah, you wouldn't have that initial setup every time, because they'd come a bit more familiar with it. So, yeah, but that was also a learning, I think, from running it that first time.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So are there any further questions? If not, I might just say thank you so much, Julia. So interesting. And I just wish I could think of a use for it in my area. Yeah.
Thanks, Julia.
So we
You're
don't.
so welcome. Thank you all for tuning in.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks everyone for attending, and I'll stop the recording.
Thanks, Anne.